Hello and welcome to another summer bonus episode of Material Matters with Grant Gibson, this time in association with Hyosung TNC. This is a podcast where I talk to a designer, maker, artist or architect about a material or technique with which they're intrinsically linked and discover how it changed their life and career. Think of it as a bit like Desert Island Discs, but with materials instead of music. Today, however, is a little bit different, as I'm chatting to Hyosung TNC's Marketing and Sustainability Director, Simon Whitmarsh-Knight, about an intriguing new material the company is spending $1 billion to develop, a biospandex or elastane that has the potential to revolutionise the clothing industry. Simon, how are you?
Very good, Grant. Thank you. Fantastic intro, by the way. So thank you for that, and thanks for the opportunity to come and chat with you and share some of our stories.
No, it's a distinct pleasure. We have a tradition on this podcast of asking guests a little about their workplace. The notion being we can work out a bit about the person by the environment they inhabit. So when we talk to craftspeople and designers and architects, I mean, this episode is slightly different, but nonetheless, I think tradition should prevail. Where are you right now? And how do you work, Simon?
I'm immediately nervous, Grant, from being put into such esteemed company as craftspeople and artists. So I actually work from home. I've been working from home for probably about 15 years now. So very lucky to have some space to work. I travel a lot, obviously with my team and visiting customers. But right now I'm at home in my office where I spend a lot of time. Luckily, I could open a window. Sometimes the cat comes in. He might do that a bit later on today. He does like to get in on these kind of things.
Does the cat have a name?
It's Ralph. So if he comes in, I'll hold him up and you can see him. But
okay.
I've got some surfing posters around with me. I'm a terrible longboard surfer. I've got some books, as we were chatting about before we started. I do love my books. And obviously something to do some work as well as enjoy surfing and reading. So laptops here and everything. And home for me is in between Rugby and Northampton in the East Midlands.
Very nice. Very nice. We're actually, rather than your office, we're actually here to talk about a new bio-based elastane made from sugarcane by Hyosung. But in the first instance, it would be good to know a little bit about the company itself, because I have to confess, before I was approached, I'd never heard of it, but it's enormous. Based in South Korea and founded in the 60s.
That's right.
I mean, nowadays it seems to make everything from electric motors to construction projects via ATM cash machines. And it was also, I discovered, and maybe you can tell me I'm wrong, but the first company to develop nylon using fishing nets. So can you tell us a little bit about the company and the area in which you represent?
Hyosung in general is a bit of especially in the textiles sector, is a bit of a sort of best kept secret. And obviously we don't want to be that, because within textiles, we're one of the leading suppliers of elastane or spandex. So, but just stepping back a little bit, Hyosung is an international business. As you said, it's a conglomerate. So it does lots of things, from trading, chemicals, car dealerships. You mentioned cash machines, weird. So lots of different things. So we're an international business, but we're headquartered in Seoul, South Korea. And obviously being a South Korean company is a big part of our DNA in terms of innovation, speed, energy, the whole ethos behind the business. So very big business, and I represent the textiles sector within that, within the whole conglomerate. And I'd forgotten this actually. It was in 2007, because not only are we the largest supplier, one of the largest now in supplier of elastane in the world, but we're also a significant supplier of performance nylon and polyester fibers. And it was way back in 2007 when Hyosung first came up with the idea and the product to take fishing nets out of the sea and reclaim them, melt them down and remake them as nylon fiber, so post-consumer recycled fiber. It was way too early, even before most of us maybe were thinking about and talking about sustainability. So the market wasn't quite ready. It's difficult to get the quality consistent and the performance. So, 20 years ago, that was a really interesting development from Hyosung. We shelved it a little bit, focused on growing the polyester and the elastane side of our business. But in the last few years, that interest in post-consumer recycled nylon has come back and is a big part of our business, as well as as we'll talk more about the elastane side of our business, or spandex, as you quite rightly called it. So the two are generic terms, Grant, as I know you're aware. Elastane we tend to use here in Europe, and spandex is the generic term that they tend to use in North America.
Interesting. Most importantly for this podcast, as you pointed out, it's the world's largest manufacturer of elastane. Now, elastane, spandex, is this incredibly, it's a ubiquitous material. I mean, when it comes to clothing, it's sort of everywhere. Obviously, one thinks of sportswear, but also underwear, socks, waistbands, motion capture suits in the movies. I mean, essentially, anything that stretches. So can we talk a little about the history of elastane and how it's made?
Sure. And I did some further research on this, Grant, this morning, thinking about our conversation today, because I wanted to get the dates right. And the name, the fantastic name behind the person who first came up with spandex. So this was a chap called Joseph C. Shivers Jr., fantastically American name. He was an American. He worked for DuPont at the time.
Yeah.
And this was back in 1958 when the spandex category was first created. So it's been going, over 50 years now, 60 years or so. So it's quite well established in the market. And one of my customers, Grant, described it to me several years ago as a bit of a comfort conundrum. Because the comfort being, elastane is what gives the comfort in clothing. As you say, it allows the stretch and recovery. And recovery is really important because many things stretch. It's the recovery power that's really important, that gives the performance over time, that leads to shape retention. That means garments keep their shape and last longer. I'm sure we'll talk about durability and longevity as part of the sustainability discussion.
We might.
We have. The conundrum being, it's difficult to then recycle garments containing elastane. So that's elastane, spandex in general, all the same have the challenge of post-consumer recycling, which of course is super important for the industry. We want to support the industry's move towards more circular business models. We're aiming to be, net zero by 2050. And that move to circular business models, circular products is key for that. And as the significant supplier of elastane in the world, we've also got to find and help the industry find solutions to the conundrum that is recycling garments with a certain, above a certain content, that contain above a certain content of elastane. So really key topic for the industry. Again, we'll probably talk about the steps we're taking to get there, because to do that, Grant, is some way off right now.
Well, this is where we're heading, because the obvious question is, what is Hyosung doing about it? Because the company has been working with recycled elastane, but that's not enough, right?
It's a great summary, yeah. So obviously over the years now, the industry has thought more and more about sustainability, in particular lowering carbon emissions. And granted, there are some challenges around sustainability, the term and the approach. Currently it's quite a challenging context in which we all live, and we understand that. Our bet is still that sustainability through regulations, through consumer behavior will become increasingly important in the future, going through quite a tough period right now. So as I mentioned, overall, the industry and regulations are encouraging a move to circular business models. And there are many definitions of circular, and we'll talk in particular about our bio-based contribution to that. But circular from a business perspective, Grant, as from an industry perspective, is around T2T recycling, consumer recycling, textile to textile recycling. And as I say, at scale, for any elastane manufacturer, that's still some way off. So we've had a pre-consumer recycled solution.
Ooh, what does that mean?
So this, and again, we want to be super clear about definitions about what things are and what they're not. So pre-consumer is using our own waste to make recycled elastane.
Okay.
So we're, one of the largest manufacturers in the world. So we're making a lot of elastane. Not that we're making it in a bad way, but obviously as part of that process, we have a natural, very small, less than 1% percentage of waste. So rather than that product go into a low value kind of use, what we've been able to do for the last 4 or 5 years is reuse that product to make 100% recycled elastane. So that's RCS certified, which is very important for the industry. Again, we'll probably talk about certifications later on. Has many third-party LCA benefits that we can talk of in terms of additional sustainability benefits. In particular, industry, as I say, focuses on carbon emissions. So our recycled elastane has around about a 74% lower carbon emission than production of standard elastane.
But presumably you have to be making virgin elastane to use the waste from that process.
Correct. So this is exactly the point, Grant. Recycled is no longer enough because whilst our sales are growing rapidly for that product, and again, the important thing about all these sustainability or these products with the more sustainable sort of attributes is they still have to work and perform in the same way as standard elastane. They have to stretch and recover. They have to give that performance quality to our customers over time. Otherwise, we're not doing our job and our customers aren't going to buy them in spite of the extra sustainability benefits. So first and foremost, they have to perform. But you're right. Recycled elastane in this way, pre-consumer, has this limitation where we're using our own waste. And that is only ever going to be a very small amount of our production, which means as our sales grow, there will be, in the medium term, a bottleneck for that feedstock, which is why post-consumer recycled feedstock is important when we talked about post-consumer recycled, and also bio-based. This is another option, Grant, because they need to work together. There isn't going to be one definitive solution for the industry. Different things, recycled, recycling, bio-based, they need to work together for the industry to offer the performance, quality, and volumes that the industry needs.
That takes us to where we need to go. You've come up with a bio-based elastane. This is why we're here, why we're talking. Regen Bio Spandex.
Yep.
I mean, can we do a bit of jargon busting, a bit more jargon busting?
It's really important.
What does bio-based actually mean?
Yeah, and this is a really critical question and one that because we're kind of pioneering in this, Grant, we're leading the way for lower impact materials, having invested up to $1 billion in our bio-BDO plant that we'll talk about in a second, and these things are not sort of one-off things. It's a continual investment to, I guess, think of the technology and the innovation, but then also the collaboration and the investment in infrastructure, which is significant when you're bringing something new to the industry. So in terms of bio-based, you're right, there's still some misunderstanding around that term. For us, it means making elastane partly with renewable content. So we're replacing some of the fossil fuel element of elastane with renewable content, in this case, sugarcane. What we're not claiming and what it isn't, Grant, is biodegradable. That's a very different topic. And we're looking at that technology. There's some interest in biodegradable. There was kind of a lot of interest in the industry 4 or 5 years ago. The industry then realized, actually, it's a very complex topic, biodegradability, because you have to think about what conditions does something biodegrade, what time. Does it biodegrade 100% or 50%? What's left when it doesn't biodegrade fully? What about the off gases? So as you can see, it's a very nuanced, very complex issue. So that's why I think the industry looked more than at recycled options. Recycle tends to be an easier concept perhaps to understand. And now we're also helping the industry, not just Hyosung, because again, the problem for the industry is, it's too complex and too big for the industry, for one person, one company to solve on their own, Grant. So this is why we'll probably talk about collaboration a lot this afternoon. We can't do this on our own. We need collaboration with infrastructure, with customers, with other producers, that kind of stuff. But it's so complex. It's so nuanced. We all need to work together to help find a solution. And we're working very closely with leading industry bodies such as Textile Exchange, Global Fashion Agenda, Fashion for Good, not only to sort of, do the further testing and interest in bio-based product, but also to help the industry think about bio-based, because terms are very important. How do we describe it? Exactly to your point.
So bio-based, but it won't biodegrade. So what happens to it at the end of life?
Yeah, we're not making any claims for end of life for this particular product, Grant. So, as we said earlier on, there are lots of different definitions of sustainability. And another customer of mine said to me a long time ago, there's nothing more sustainable than a garment that lasts. And, that durability, that longevity is often given by the elastane content in the garment. But it's a very different topic in terms of end-of-life solutions, which brings us back to that T2T recycling of garments. There's a big demand for that right now. There currently isn't the infrastructure to collect garments, to sort, to chop them up and to recycle. There's a lot of investment in different recycling technologies. We're investing in different technologies. We're working with different companies to bring some regenerated fibers to the market. So post-consumer recycled polyesters, nylons. The big thing, in addition to that, Grant, as we mentioned, is, okay, how do we get to post-consumer recycled nylon? And that, as I say, for the industry to do that at post-consumer recycled elastane, for the industry to do that at scale is probably 5-6 years away.
Yeah. Interesting. When I talk about new materials on this podcast and at our fairs and conference, one word comes up again and again, and you've used it several times already in the 15 or so minutes we've been talking, which is scale. Now, Hyosung is spending $1 billion on this material. And I'm interested, I wonder, is that because the company's management is aware that it's responsible for a material that isn't bio-based or is pumping out carbon? Is it because of regulation? The company's website mentions the EU carbon border adjustment policy, for instance. Is it consumer pressure? What has persuaded them to take such a massive investment?
Honestly, I think it's a mix of all of those, Grant. And my boss recently summed it up very well in that she said, there was a real conviction in our business that if we didn't make the first step as one of the leading suppliers, one of the leading manufacturers of elastane in the industry, there couldn't be then material transformation for the industry if us as a huge player couldn't make that initial step. So I think it's obviously a mix of lots of different things: regulations, consumer behavior. In the future, Grant, I hope we're talking not just about, carbon reduction, but also biodiversity, regenerative agriculture, those kind of things. So lots of things are changing, but there's certainly the regulations are helping, I think will help with consumer behavior. But it was really a deep conviction for our business that, as I say, we needed to make that investment. We needed to make that first move to put the infrastructure together in terms of sourcing, verification, product development, working with our mills then to make that product into fabric. We need to do that to give the industry, the chance to make material sort of transition really to lower impact materials. So it's really not a question now, because we're doing this at scale. It's not a question of does the actual innovation work? Does the technology work? For us, Grant, it's more a question of how quickly can the industry adopt these products. And that's not without its own challenges, of course, but we've built the bio-BDO plant, and we can talk a little bit more about that. We're making bio-spandex. So again, the idea is not around the technology working. Is it going to do? We know that. It's now helping the industry to adopt these lower impact materials at scale.
Okay. So where does the sugarcane come from, Simon?
So just go back a stage in that we know there's no perfect product, Grant, and we're always trying to make iterations to get better and better rather than wait for the perfect solution to arrive. That's not the Hyosung way. So we want to launch things and then obviously get better and better as technology and understanding allows. So a few years ago, we launched our first version of our bio-based product. We're using corn as the feedstock.
Okay.
And that was adopted by a number of different brands, including Pangaea and Icebreaker. And again, the intention was always to keep getting better as the technology allowed and as the industry understanding improved. So we've been in discussion for a number of years with our technology partner, Genomatica. And then, through that collaboration, it allowed us to think about different types of feedstock. And again, the more people talking about bio-based, Grant, the better, because that's better for the industry. And in several years' time, we might be thinking of, using a different bio-based feedstock. We might have found something that's an improvement from sugarcane. But right now, it's sugarcane. It's a very effective plant at growing. It's also very efficient at sequestering carbon. And specifically, when you're processing that into the raw material for elastane, which is BDO, in this case bio-BDO, you need one less step to process the sugarcane compared to corn-based products, which helps to lower our carbon emissions overall. So, in answer to your question, sugarcane we're currently sourcing from Brazil. Brazil is the largest exporter of sugar in the world with probably the most advanced infrastructure. So it was a clear, obvious place for us to start that sourcing journey. There's an overproduction of sugar in the world, Grant. We're growing too much and our consumption globally is decreasing. So, we're using that surplus that's already in the market and is used in other areas such as biofuels. We're taking some of that surplus and then we're using it in a new sort of high value end use, in this case, textiles. So we work with our verification program partner called Zarnico and their Vive verification platform.
Yes.
Because it's really important to think about where is the sugar coming from? How is it grown? Are the farmers following the right social labor compliance issues, those kind of things?
Yeah, traceability. I mean, let's talk about the Vive program if we can. What is that? What does it do?
So Vive is a verification program that was originally developed for the food and beverage industry. So the Vive platform helps companies like Coca-Cola, PepsiCo to source all the sugar for their products. So we're using an existing infrastructure that is then as a verification platform, helping us source the sugar, benchmarking against third-party certifications to monitor against things, of course, deforestation, social labor compliance, farming practices, those kind of things, Grant. So it's not a certification because you can't certify yourself, but it's benchmarking against existing third-party certificates in relevant spaces to ensure that the right practices are being followed. So the Vive platform is run by a company called Zarnico. Zarnico is a very old, beautiful business based in London that's into supply chain consultancy and finance for circular business models.
Okay. So we've got sugarcane growing in Brazil. What is the process then? How do you turn that sugarcane into a bioelastane?
Great question. So the sugar is first milled, comes to the refineries as sugarcane and then is milled. And somebody with much more knowledge than I, Grant, was telling me about the different color variations of sugar. I didn't realize beforehand, but I think this is called the Icumsa scale. And depending on your end use for your sugar, there are thousands of different colors and that you can dictate in terms of using that sugar. So it's a really interesting topic. So what we get in our plant in Vietnam is the milled sugar, so the raw sugar. And then from that raw sugar, our plant that we made, this was the investment, Grant, you mentioned of up to $1 billion in Vietnam. We put it in Vietnam because we're already making elastane in Vietnam. And we've created, by doing that, the first kind of integrated production system, low carbon production system for bio-based elastane. So other than the sugar coming in from Brazil, everything is done by us in Vietnam. That means, of course, much faster to market because you're doing everything together. You're not shipping to different places. It's a more resilient supply chain. We've all seen the shocks to the system, that we all experienced through COVID and all the other, challenging things that are going on in the world right now. So you've got a, faster speed to market, more resilience, and you're also closer to a lot of the garment and fabric production still. So that's why we invested in that plant in Vietnam. The raw sugar comes into the plant, and then through a series of fermentation, distillation, we're then able to turn that sugar into a component of elastane. It's called BDO, butanediol.
Okay. And
butanediol is typically made from fossil fuel-based ingredients. So by replacing that element with renewable raw materials, we're able to significantly lower our carbon emissions during production of the elastane. And BDO, Grant, by the way, is not just used in elastane. It's also used in footwear manufacture, in the midsole. It's used in packaging and automotive interiors. So coming back to your question around why did we do this? One, because it was the right thing to do. Two, of course, because there are some really significant commercial opportunities beyond apparel.
So that's interesting. So there are other markets for BDO.
Absolutely. So we can have a really significant impact in lowering, lower impact materials in different industries, not just not just apparel, but footwear, automotive interiors, and packaging, which is really important. Hyosung is the largest purchaser of BDO in the world. So if we over time can change that fossil fuel based BDO to renewable to bio BDO, that is a huge saving in carbon emissions across a number of different industries. So obviously this thing doesn't happen overnight. It's taken a long time because we're pioneering in this space. You have to put the infrastructure together, find the partners, the collaboration. But over time, if we can now help move our BDO to bio BDO, as I mentioned, that makes a significant impact across a number of different industries, which is great for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been through the process.
Yeah.
And we have the material. So how does that material compare to traditional fossil-based elastane in terms of stretch, durability, feel?
Yep. This is part of the challenge, I think, sometimes with more sustainable products, Grants. The industry in general can sometimes think there has to be a trade-off between a more sustainable product and a standard product, for want of
I had trade-offs written in my notes. Simon.
There we go. So this is a really important thing. But like we mentioned earlier, if the product doesn't perform in the same way as our standard elastane that gives that stretch and recovery and the performance and the quality that our customers need in their apparel, they're not going to buy it, Grant, even if it's got much lower carbon emissions, right? Because if it doesn't work, you're just not going to buy it. So it's the number one factor for us in thinking about moving to lower impact materials is how do we ensure the same performance over time? It's definitely the first question actually our customers ask. It's not price. It's up there.
Well, that's interesting because that's my next question.
It's in the top 3 or 4, depending on the customer, of course. But the number one thing customers ask us is, "Oh, this is fantastic, brilliant news. Does it work the same way as my standard product that I'm buying from you?" The answer is yes. And that's in both knits and wovens, Grant. So in, tops, bottom weights, denim, socks. We've done the trials, in our own labs with our mill partners, making fabrics, garments, etc. As you can imagine, all the testing, trialing we've done for us to get to this point, for us to launch and talk about it. We've done a lot of testing across all the different applications, and it's a different product. Of course it is. It's, partly made from renewable materials. So we work with customers for them to do their trialing and testing and wearer trials. But it works in the same way in terms of stretch recovery, performance over time. So there is no trade-off. It's an additional benefit because you're getting all of that with the extra benefits of third-party endorsed sustainability benefits.
No trade-off.
Yeah.
But what about price? I mean, it's new. It's involved a lot of research. Presumably people are going to have to pay for that.
That's right. It is. This is one of the big questions for the industry as a whole, Grant. And you can imagine when you're pioneering in this way, it's not something that can be done overnight and then once and done. This is a continual investment from us into new lower impact materials. It's taken us a while to get to this stage, and we've had to put a whole new infrastructure and value chain together to do this. So naturally, there is going to be a premium on the product, at this point in time. We've invested, we continue to invest up to $1 billion in that plant. We've put together the new infrastructure, new value chain. So of course, there's going to be a premium to that product. Otherwise, we can't keep innovating, Grant, and putting these new things together. Obviously, elastane is a small component of most garments. So whilst there's a premium per kg in the price of fiber, by the time our customers have worked that into fabric and then garment, the upcharge is pennies. So that's what we're also helping our partners to understand, get the product in, do the trials, you'll see it works. When you get the costing through, it's not a huge increase because elastane is a smaller component compared to a polyester or a cotton, which is generally sort of, 70-80% of the industry's use and often used as the biggest component in garments. Elastane is a smaller component, so has less of an impact in terms of increased fiber price.
Okay, but it is a bit more.
Correct.
So as a marketeer, I'm quite intrigued, particularly when there's a cost of living crisis.
Yep.
How do you persuade people to spend even a little bit more on a product that isn't going to choke the planet?
Again, it's a super critical question right now because, none of us live in a vacuum. We all are impacted by the context in which we live. And that context includes at the moment challenges around cost of living, energy crisis. We've seen, supply chain crisis. So there's a lot happening right now. Regulations are coming in also, which are quite confusing for the market. So There's no simple single solution, Grant, which is why we try to offer a range of different solutions for customers, because some customers still focus on recycled, using our recycled elastane, for example. If they put that, because it's 100% recycled, if they put that with a recycled nylon or recycled polyester, they could have 100% recycled fabric, which is a very strong story, very easily understood by consumers. Other customers focus more on bio-based. So this is why we're trying to offer a range of solutions. So number one, it's got to do its job. It's got to work. Number two, we really got to have the certification, the traceability behind it. Again, that's quite challenging when you're pioneering in this way. And then three, there is an appetite for helping customers tell that story, Grant. It's can be quite complex to, in particular on the bio-based side, get that story across to end users. And we're in this world of B to B to C, if that concept still exists. It's a bit old fashioned maybe, because we're still all consumers, all humans. But, we have to do I think more of the work for our customers to help them understand what it is, what it isn't, give them solutions to then take that story to their end users. So there's a lot of support, education that we can provide our customers to do that.
How do your customers tell that story to the wider public, I wonder?
Yeah, I think it varies. Again, we think a lot about subjective value and different brands or retailers. There are indirect customers as our direct customers of the mills. They have different subjective value for what we bring. Some may want a hang tag. Some may want the innovation. Some may want, more competitive pricing. So it really varies by customer. But I guess there are two or three things that are consistent. One is product performance and data. Like we say, does it work in the same way as my product I'm currently buying from you, the standard elastane? That's really important. And number two, what about traceability and certification? So this also is really important. When you're pioneering in this way, we're kind of helping the industry also to find the most relevant and appropriate certification for bio-based in textiles. So whilst the recycled part of the textile industry has a very clear value chain and certification network, bio-based is quite new. So again, the partnerships with people like Textile Exchange is really important to help the industries and our customer think about the most appropriate certification schemes, whether that be USDA preferred, SGS, ISCC. There are so many different options within that, but that's really important. So product performance, certifications, and then of course third-party LCAs, Grant. All of the things we're talking about are certified, are substantiated by third-party LCAs. It's difficult because you could probably do another podcast just on LCAs, because everybody's doing different things with LCAs. There is no one single methodology, although again, the industry is trying to move in that direction. So I was chatting to a bio-based membrane startup earlier this week. It's really tough for them to do LCAs because customers have different providers they want to work with, and these things are really expensive. So we're in a fortunate position, being a very solid, stable financial company, that we can invest in these LCAs, because at the moment that's a very important sort of seal of approval for customers.
And I think I'm right in saying there are two varieties of the new product, Regen Bio Plus, Regen Bio Max. What is the difference between the two?
We tend to look at those in terms of reduction in carbon emissions. So both using sugarcane as the raw material. So again, being super clear about what they are and what they're not. It's partly made from raw materials. Industry can't make 100% bio-based product right now. In the future, and obviously we're looking at that, but there are a couple of components that you can't yet do consistently with bio. So our two versions, Grant, will have, when we've completed the LCA for the new plant, because that will be done in Q1 next year. You have to run the plant for a little while before you can do the LCA. But we're anticipating that those products will probably have carbon emissions of either 45% or up to 55%, depending on the two versions. So that's kind of how we look at those two different products.
So different mix, and they have a different carbon reduction.
Yeah.
I was reading a press release about the company's sponsorship of the Global Fashion Summit in Copenhagen.
That's right.
Happened earlier this year. And I was interested, Simon, because the word collaboration came up twice. You've alluded to it in the conversation we've had so far, but how and where does the industry, in your view, need to collaborate?
This is a key topic for me, Grant. I'm super interested in all things systems, and collaboration is part of that. So for us, I think there are a number of elements. Firstly, technology partnership is really important to be able to deliver this new innovation, and in the future, whatever the renewable resource could be. So working very closely with Genomatica, with whom we work on the technology to enable the distillation, the fermentation of the sugarcane. That's super important and developed over a number of years. I think in terms of our direct customers, who are the mills, we have this kind of push-pull business model where we're pushing the fiber, if you like, to the next part of the chain, the mills. And as a marketing business, we're also talking about this pull effect where we work with brands and retailers, pulling through that innovation in the value chain. So those partnerships are crucial, in terms of making fabric, testing, talking to brands and retailers, getting the understanding. And that's quite a challenge in its own, Grant, because using, a sort of global sportswear brand or a ready-to-wear brand, often there are different incentives within their teams. So the sustainability team may have different incentives compared to the purchasing team, compared to the marketing team. So we have to work in collaboration across those businesses, trying to help them understand how this is going to work, how this could, of course, help with their product, in terms of performance and quality, but also have a positive impact more on their corporate sustainability goals, that kind of stuff. So that collaboration with our direct and indirect customers is absolutely crucial. And that means a lot of education and a lot of work to help them internally sell the story to the next person in the chain, so that, we help them get what they want in that product development. So industry, in terms of technology, partnership in terms of customers. And I guess the third part of that, Grant, is, of course, industry, like industry organizations. We mentioned Textile Exchange, Global Fashion Agenda, Fashion for Good. These are some, and there are others, great industry organizations who are trying to support the industry, move in the right direction, consolidate, and kind of align on the key things. And we touched on that in terms of certification for bio-based. So collaboration with the industry organizations like that is also really important.
So the factory is up and running in Vietnam.
Yep.
You've already done some projects with Pangar and Icebreaker using corn.
Yep.
How close are we being to this material being in the shops? Presumably there's still infrastructure to build to reach market. Or how are you going about doing that?
The key thing for the product, Grant, is it's a drop-in solution, the fiber. So nothing new is needed for mills and customers to use this product. So, we're making the new product now, the new version now, partly made from sugarcane. So our existing customers who you mentioned, we're helping to transition to the new product. And then, of course, we will be trialing that new product with other brands and retailers around the world. So as you know, in textiles, there's often quite a long lead time for going to see somebody, but before, then seeing that product arrive in store. So we should start to see some of this product towards the end of 27 appear at retail. And then, of course, after that, significant amount of product arriving 28 onwards for those brands and retailers that have a slightly longer time. So it's in the market already as a corn-based product. We're transitioning the customers across the new product, but we should start to see that product coming into the retail end of next year.
Have you done pilots with the new product yet?
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yeah. So, all up and running, as we say, the investment that we made was in making the bio-BDO plant in Vietnam. We're already making spandex in Vietnam. So that bio-BDO plant has already processed the first batch of sugar from Brazil. We've already made that into bio-BDO. We've supplied that to our plant in Vietnam. This is the integrated production system that we talked about. And so we're now making that bio-based version using sugarcane as the raw material. So, next quarter, we'll see more companies doing trials with that. And then those that are quick will get product into the market towards the end of next year.
And are you already learning things from those trials?
Definitely. I think product-wise, we've done the trial and the testing with mills to ensure that, as we say, it's a like-for-like product. It's it's a different product compared to standard elastane. It's a bio-based version. So, of course, there are things that, our customers will want to trial and think about with their production system. But I think the thing that we are learning probably more so, Grant, is the amount of education that is needed. We touched on this earlier on. There's still some confusion in general in the market about bio-based, what it is, what it isn't. And we touched on that earlier on, and it's really important for us to be very clear about this product. And then, as I mentioned, within companies, within our brand and retail customers, there could be some either confusion or misalignment around sustainable offerings. We talked about the potential price premiums sometimes. So we're learning a lot, Grant, about how to help our customers manage that. We're seeing a lot more flexibility in the market now on how to manage, any premiums involved in these kind of innovations. So whether that's companies maybe, buying the fiber direct. Again, I'm not giving any specific information or talking, about any confidential stuff, but things we see in general. As I say, there's more flexibility to try and find a way to make these things work at scale in the market. So whether that means brands and retailers could be paying a license fee for a certain product, not in our case, and then their value chain buys the product at the standard price, or whether companies are incentivizing buying teams with maybe internal carbon credits, that kind of stuff. There's more flexibility around the pricing of the product and how to measure the impact of those more, sort of lower impact materials and those decisions.
Are people more receptive, Simon, I wonder, to bio-based solutions at a time where there is an oil crisis brewing or brewed in the Middle East?
Yeah, thank you. It's a super point. It's a grim situation that's happening, and it does, of course, help the industry think about the reliance on fossil fuels. We talked about the move towards more circular business models, and part of that can be through T2T recycling. Part of that, as we said, could also be through the move towards lower impact materials like renewables. So at a time where there's ongoing conflict, unfortunately, where there are certainly difficulties in supply chain, that's the geopolitical issues have already caused increase in raw material prices for synthetic fibers. So you're absolutely right. One of the ways of looking at that is it helps to focus the industry on more local bio-based alternatives to sort of fossil fuel synthetic products.
And what are Hyosung's ambitions for the material? Do they want to rid the world of oil-based elastane? What ultimately does the company want to achieve?
The company as a whole, we want to be net zero by 2050, and we want to help the industry transition to those more circular business models, Grant. So we talked about the overall goal, getting to T2T recycling of spandex. That's a really critical thing to allow, that infrastructure to develop. And we know that's some way off. So we're investing in that. We know it's the right thing that the industry wants to do. We're looking at that internally. We've already got some collaborations. But until we get to that point, we need to offer solutions now. And those solutions are recycled or more bio-based. And again, Hyosung is one player in this. We happen to be quite a big player, but we can't do it on our own, Grant. So without laboring the point, collaboration, working across industry. As I say, the more people talking about bio-based, the better. It means more solutions for our customers. So the whole idea of collaboration and alignment across the industry is really important, because these problems are too big, too complex for Hyosung to solve on their own. Everybody, we need partnerships, we need collaboration to solve those.
And we are coming towards the end of our time. So kind of final question really, Simon, which is, I'm presuming this isn't the only innovation Hyosung is currently working on. I mean, I've heard rumor of a bio-based nylon. Can you confirm or deny?
Yes. I love your sources there, Grant. So of course, Hyosung's grown very quickly to be, one of the largest suppliers of elastane and a significant supplier of nylon polyester. And we want to continue to grow. And coming back to the point we mentioned earlier on, right at the start, about Hyosung maybe being a bit of a best kept secret in the trade. We want to change that, Grant. And, it's great to be one of the biggest, but we also need to continue innovating and be seen as a leading provider in terms of new innovations to our customers, more solutions to customers. So continued innovation is critical. We've talked about collaboration across the industry. So we're always looking at, new products. Bio-based nylon could be another thing. We talked about T2T, recycled spandex, which is crucial for us. We also mentioned, what's next in terms of bio-based. We want to keep getting better, Grant. I think that's the thing that I've learned in my time here at Hyosung, the business is quick and it doesn't stand still. It wants to do things and get better all the time. So, and that, not always easy in the industry we're in, but that gives me, that gives me a lot of energy thinking about the business trying to do that. So who knows what we'll do next, but those are some of the things that I know that we're working on.
So we're watching this space, in other words.
Let's hope so, yeah.
Okay. Well, Simon, thank you so much for your time. That was fascinating. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us, Grant.
My huge thanks go to Simon as well as Hyosung TNC for sponsoring this intriguing conversation. You can find out more about this fascinating material at hyosungtextile.com. You can also go to our website to hear other podcasts that I've done, to sign up to our newsletter, and to find out all about the various events we'll be running for the rest of 2026. One more thing, it would make me really happy if you went to my Patreon page and made a pledge at patreon.com/Material Matters. For as little as £3.50 a month, you can receive invites to various Material Matters events, as well as getting access to each episode before it's published to the wider world. Material Matters is a completely independent concern, and any help you can offer would be hugely appreciated. Ultimately, you'll be helping to take the message, the importance of materials, skill, craft, and design to a whole new audience. Our new series will be starting very soon, so watch out for that. And thanks very much for listening.